Hey guys, wanted to throw this in real quick. Towards the end of the video, the focus goes out for like a minute or so, but I was actually talking, so just, bear with it. It only lasts for like a minute or something. Be going to PRI here in a couple days. Haven't been to PRI since 2006 when I think it was in Orlando or Orange County Civic, something like that. My wife and I had a great time. We went to Universal, made a big vacation out of it. 2006 was an awesome year. I had a couple booths at that time too, back then. Let's see, we won, or I should say the team my engines powered. We won the Wheeling National Modified Tournament, NASCAR Tournament. I'm sorry, the NASCAR Wheeling Modified Championship for the National. We won the local short track at Bowman Gray Stadium that year. We had the fastest lap ever cut. We had the most wins, 72. And that was just in that genre. We had, lots of stuff going. Drag racing wins. What a great year that was. And it's just been, it's better now than it's ever been. So, looking forward to going to PRI, and hope to see some of you there. If you see me, I'll be wearing my shirt, so come up and say hey. All right, enjoy the video, guys. Oh, I'm back again. So I also wanted to say that there are some very good aftermarket heads out there that are not, thousands of dollars, that do a very good job. I highly recommend most CNC programs from Dart. I have personally used some of them, and they are very good. As far as my own personal CNC programs, we have stuff for 23 degree, Ford, SP2. I have one of the best 18 degree heads, I think, on the planet. So if you're interested in that, especially if you're doing any kind of NASCAR racing or drag racing, you run any kind of heads like those, by all means, please, send us an email or a text message and let us know. As far as drag racing goes, you guys kind of know about the circle track stuff, but we have a 355 small block with a 1050 Dominator, 23 degree head, true 23 degree head, not rolled or anything. And it runs 6 flats in the 8th. We won the Carolina Coalition 3 times with that little motor. So, and we won Pink's All Out, the TV show. Anyways, I just wanted to throw that in. There are some very good heads out there that don't cost thousands and thousands of dollars. Is there a difference between the high price stuff and those? Yeah, there is. Like I said, 900 to 1,000 of a small block. I have the recipe. So anyway, thought I'd throw that in. Y'all have a great day. Good afternoon, folks, or morning, whenever you're watching this. This is Brian Salter here with Salter Racing Engines, and today we're going to be talking about getting serious about making horsepower. And the topic of the day is going to be cylinder heads, but mostly about the heads. We're going to be talking about valves and valve seats, and we're going to do this in a series. Sorry about the crooked camera. I am shooting this video by myself, so I will be back and forth hitting the pause button probably. But serious about power. Boy, I'm going to tell you, being in this business for 30 years and doing NASCAR motors, you see it all. And I have heard some stuff in the last couple of days on the internet that has just blown my mind with, I think people are getting big with YouTube but lack the actual real world experience. And today I'm going to show you some stuff that's going to be very simple but yet make big impacts on performance. I watched a cam video the other day, and man, okay, well, I got videos coming. This is gonna be part one. There'll be multiple videos in this series. So how do you get from something like this, or how do you get to something like this? Let me word it that way. You know, when you buy something off the shelf for a budget, you get something like this. And after all these years, I mean, I have my own CNC programs. This is an Edelbrock E Street for a Chevrolet, by the way. I also have some for Fords. I have some cup stuff for D3s. Big block stuff here. I got a smorgasbord of stuff, all kinds. Engines I've got to do. I got 9 engines to do right now, and obviously cylinder heads are part of that. So I'm going to be showing you some tricks of the trade. I'm going to be showing you some things that you need to pay attention to and some things that don't matter. And we're going to start off with number one. When you talk about cylinder head porting, I'm going to give you a very good wise tip, okay? Because I've been porting heads for more than 25 years. Well, let me just ask you a question. Are you porting heads to the engine or to the valve that's in the head? And the valve that's in the head, is it put in there due to the size of the engine? Is it as big a valve as you can get in the chamber? I mean, what's the reason and the point behind your valves, the valve size? These are questions I want you to ponder on. Do we do a back cut such as this one? Or do we not do a back cut such as that one? Do we do a 12-degree face angle like these two are? Even on the exhaust? Or do we do the tulip style exhaust, you know, with a much steeper exhaust angle? Well, hopefully after this video, you can make some better choices. Now keep in mind, in order for me to take something like this that you buy from Summit or whoever, Jeg, Summit, wherever you get it, EPW, I don't know, the guy off the street corner, right? Wherever you get these from, how do you go from this to this? And the answer is, well, if you've never done that kind of work, you don't. You have to hire someone. If you got to hire someone, you're talking mega bucks, okay? And mega bucks being, you know, $3 to $4 grand. And I'm talking work, labor. So if you were to buy a set of race-ready, all-out heads from me, depending on the head you bought, okay? It could be anywhere from, this would include completely assembled, all titanium components with shaft systems, anywhere from, I'm going to say $8,000 to $15,000. Then you got to get an intake. If the intake is going to be all out like the cylinder heads, you're looking at probably $3,000. So now you've got nearly 15 grand tied up in a small block, just the heads and intake. And the only thing about it is if you get it from me, you know that it works. It sets records, it wins races. Because that's what I do. That's what we do. That's our goal. I build engines for a purpose. All right, so I'm sure you're probably tired of looking at this. What are we talking about right now, Salter? So here we go. I want to show you some stuff. This is out of the box head. And yep, I dropped it. Come here, boy. All right, out of the box head. Notice the casting. Everybody has seen stuff like this before. And there's this, you know, that's that Cosmoline and packing grease, all that junk still in there. Brand new stuff here. All right, so these things got potential, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. They got potential. And here, Elderbrock has CNC'd the entrance only, of course. This phone is really struggling to, on that 3D look, it's really struggling to focus. There we go. You can see it's just barely CNC'd on the entrance. It's kind of a gasket profile type deal. And that's it. You don't even have, you know, very little push rod clearance. All that jazz. So what's wrong with what I'm, you know, how will this head do? Well, this head will do great if you're trying to stay between 300 and 400 like it sits. Now, obviously, guys, you can push the limit. You can really crank the compression to it and run a different fuel, and you can get more than that. But I'm talking about you can easily build 300 to 400 horsepower street engine very easily with this thing just the way it is. Very easy. What are some problems with it? And that's what I want to point out to you. All right. Problem number one. Let's look at the seat. Right here. This is a problem. This will cause shrouding of the valve. Now, what is shrouding of the valve? Well, I showed you shrouding when we did the little piston video a few days ago, or however long ago it was. Let's put a valve in here. I still got the seals in them too, so they're a little stiff. Shrouding. Let's just crack this open here. All right. Let's get a bird's eye view. So there's shrouding. That's some shrouding for you. What does that mean? It means it's blocking your flow. It's blocking your airflow. And one of the things I learned as a young man doing this was, before I got a flow bench, I would take these valves, I'll kind of show you here briefly. I would take these valves and I would put them underneath. Again, I did not have a flow bench. This is when I was young. I would take these valves and I would put them in a parts washer and I'd clamp them with one of those flexible wand things that you can tighten up and hold its place. And I would clamp it in the stream. And so the stream would be flowing. The stream would catch it about here and be coming straight down on the valve. And I would see how the flow would kick off the valve. Now pay attention here, because I'm about to enlighten you, because I know right now you think I'm crazy. This is stuff I did at 19 years old. So I had this in the parts washer stream, and my parts washer at the time was a metal tube, had a pretty thin stream. And so it was really good, really consistent. And I'd put the valve in there and I would watch how the spray would come off of that valve. Because remember, what's blocking your flow? The valve. The valve is in your way. And that valve is very critical. It's very important. Let's set this up here, maybe we can see a little better. Okay, so the stream would hit this valve face. It would hit right in here on the stem, and I would watch it as it would come off. And I got to where I would grind these valves, different angles, different back cuts, different margins, to where the stream, instead of coming way out wide here, would actually wrap around this valve. I'm not kidding you. At 19 years old, I had my own valve grinding angles to where that stream would literally come straight off the valve. Now, at 19 years old, And again, I enlisted in the Army before I graduated high school, so by then I was in the service, but this was always my passion. And so I was working on people's cars. You know, we would, whenever we could, all right, whenever we could, we would, there was a lot of hot rodders in the Army, and we would go to grudge races each other and that kind of stuff, you know, because the division had, you know, between 15 and 20,000 people, and there was lots of young guys that had hot rods. So we'd have grudge drag races, and everybody was coming to me to fix up their car, or everybody bet their money, you know, against the other guy. Of course, when you didn't make any money, it was kind of important to win. So these are little tricks I picked up. So I was grinding valves based off of the flow I got off of that parts washer. That was my test. I didn't have a flow bench. And I could not believe the results I was getting. And here's what I found. I found the margin. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not focusing. Man, that irritates me. Okay, there we go. I found the margin was critical. Where is it? There it is. This is the margin right there. I just painted it. That is the margin. That is a straight down part of the valve. It comes down right underneath the seat. I'm sorry, I'm moving. I'm trying to be still here. That's your margin. And that margin thickness would change my flow. But it also would change how well the heat conduction took place. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So then you have the seat, the actual seat angle on the valve, which is the part that actually seals when the valve shuts. And that's this one right here. Everybody see that one? And this particular valve that you're looking at is on a 45-degree seat, which is fairly standard for, you know, mediocre, fairly high-performance engines. I mean, a lot of race engines are at 45 degrees. It's a good safe angle because with a really stiff valve spring, it's less likely to pull the valve up in the seat and cause it to tulip, which would end your day badly. But there are better angles. For example, 50 degrees, 52, 55, that type of thing. So you get the idea. Now, on top of that angle is what we call the back cut, and it's right here. And on this particular valve, it's a 30-degree back cut. And it's also about 100, I just roughly eyeballed it with this caliper. It's about 110 thousandths wide, somewhere in there. The 45 angle is about 70 thousandths wide. As best I could see with my eyes. I did not have my glasses on at the time. And the margin is generally speaking about 70 as well. Most of the time I make my margin 70 on a brand new valve. Now with that being said, those three angles, the margin, which is usually out of the box, unless you specify other, is usually 90 degrees down. Then your valve seat angle, unless you specify, it can be anything. Remember, the old Pontiacs used to run what, 30 or 35 degree seat angles? I can't remember. A lot of diesels and some low RPM tractors will run 30, 35, 33 on their seat angle. Then on top of that is your back cut, which is 30 degrees. And then you have a 12-degree face angle above, above the back cut to the radius that goes into the stem. All right. Now, with that being said, those three angles right there make a huge impact on cylinder head flow characteristics. And I say characteristics because, remember, the valve opens and gets to max lift, and then it goes back to closing. So it is in the process of opening and in the process of closing 1,000,000 times longer than it is at max lift. So it is so critically important that we get this valve to flow at low lift and mid lift numbers. So critically important. Now, when I increase my valve seat angle, okay, and that's the one in the middle, when I increase that angle from say 45 to 50 or 52, a lot of times you will lose your low lift flow. Now, don't ask me why that is. It just is. And it's not true on every head, but it is true on most heads. So I had to figure out a way to get a crazy high flow number, but keep the low lift flow. How do I do it? And I found the answer to be in my margin. All right, now, one thing I see people do is they cut that 30-degree back cut angle really, really wide. And you're hurting yourself when you do that. You are really hurting yourself when you do that. Now, I don't care if you want to keep doing it. You can keep eating our exhaust, but I'm trying to help you. Put a 30-degree back cut on it, but don't go too wide with it. You say, well, why not? Because the airflow will follow that 30-degree when it's that wide and not necessarily follow the other two below it. And you want it to follow the two below it. The whole purpose of this is as soon as that valve starts to open, it starts flowing immediately. And you think, well, doesn't it do that anyways? No, it does not always do that. It does not. So if we go with a 45, which is a great valve seat angle, you have no problem making the 800-900 horsepower with 45-degree seat angles. I do it all the time. All right, nothing wrong with that. Keep your 30-degree around 100, but don't go much more. Don't go more than that. If you need to go more than that, work on your valve seat. All right, now the margin. Say, how did I find the margin? I started playing with the margin angle. In other words, do I want it 90 degrees? I know what angle I want it at, but I'm not going to tell you. And I can tell you it ain't 90. You need to work for it like I did. I'm just trying to point you in the right direction. It's not always necessary to cut the margin less than 90. Sorry about that, focus, but sometimes it is. When you're trying to gain low and mid lift flow, your margin can help you a ton just by changing that 90-degree angle. Okay, now you work on that. Now let's go back to this a minute. I asked you in the beginning of the video, when you work on a head, are you porting the head to the size of the engine or to the RPM range you're trying to get to? Or are you porting, or whatever reason you're porting it, right? There's probably 100 reasons why you're porting it a certain way. Or are you porting it to the valve size? And if you are porting it to the valve size, why is your valve the size that it is? So why is the valve the size that it is? And here's a little better drawing. Well, it's more easier to understand and see it. Your margin, you might, let me move these arrows out of the way. You might want your margin to look like this. Nah, that can't be that crazy. But you might want them to look like that. I don't know. You might just want them straight. Or heck, you might not want any margin at all. Like some of these modern cars don't have any margin at all. It's just a seat angle and there's this little tiny, hardly immeasurable margin, right? And I'm telling you right now, there's something there to be had, okay? And you say, what is it again? Low and mid lift flow. When I change this, say from a 45, or even if I got a 45, and my low lift numbers are not what I want, there's work in that margin to be had, okay? I'm not going to tell you what to do. It took me a little bit to find it, but I'm telling you where to look. This 12-degree face angle is great. Don't mess with that. This back cut, I never go more than that. And sometimes I don't go that much. A lot of times I don't go that much. Okay? 45-degree seat. 50, 52, right there, you're going to pick up your high lift flow numbers, and you're going to lose some load sometimes. And if you do, you can get it back with a margin, but you got to work at it. Now, I want to show you another thing that's a big deal, good and bad, and the difference between a head that I do and a head that you buy out of the box. All right, here we go. Now, if you look over here, move this little thingy. I have a cross-sectional view, and let's see here. Back up just a tad. There we go. Right there, it says bad, too wide. Now look here what we're talking about. This is, for example, the Edelbrock head over there, and I'm not knocking Edelbrock. They make excellent products, okay? But you have to understand, and you're going to understand why they do what they do in this little section, okay? They make their valve seat angles on the seat itself. In other words, this was like the valve seat that you cut, and now you're literally looking at the valve seat as if you whacked it in half, and you're looking at the profile of that seat, okay? That's what's called a cross section. So this is how wide the valve seat is. In other words, when you put the valve in the hole, the seat angle of that 45-degree seat angle over here will sit right there and meet it. And then you'd have a margin, your valve seat angle, you'd have your back cut, and that's how it was set in there. And you'll notice I put a comment, bad, too wide, okay? This is bad for what? Bad for flow. But so why do they do it then? They do it because of this surface contact area right here. How does that valve cool itself? Because it's riding in a guide, it gets opened by a rocker arm, and it's sitting on the valve seat with spring pressure applied to it. But how does it cool itself? I mean, you got to remember, all inside the cylinder head here, you got water, coolant flowing around, right? So the antifreeze or coolant or water pulls the heat out of the valve train component, pulls it out of the seats, pulls it out of the head, passes it to the radiator, radiator emits it to the atmosphere through airflow, and then the cooler water gets back into the engine. How does that valve cool down? It cools down from surface contact right there. These companies cannot send out cylinder heads with the way that I would do it on a race engine because they have to make sure that cylinder head lasts an amount of time. They don't want you burning valves or overheating things and causing the seats to fall out of the head because of overheating. Now, by the way, let me say this while I'm on the subject. If you ever have seats installed into a cylinder head, an aluminum cylinder head, you make sure they put them in at 7 thousandths press. Every seat I install goes in at 7 thousandths press fit. Every one. And I never have one fail, ever, okay? Make sure any shop you use, make sure they do that. Now we know that if the seat is 2 inches and the hole is 2 inches, that's called a zero clearance fit. And then you have what's called an interference fit, which is where the seat would be 3 thousandths bigger than the hole. And then you have, or that's called a press fit. Now I can't remember, now I'm confused. I haven't said these things in so long. Anyway, you have slip fit, zero clearance, press fit, interference fit, and 7 thousandths is beyond that. Okay, 7 thousandths is, it's freaking tight, all right? But it ain't gonna come out. Now, moving on. This is why the seats are wide from these particular companies. And I don't blame them. They have to stand behind their product. But, again, all out performance, we're trying to get all we can out of it. I don't care about that. We know that we can turn them 9,000 RPMs for 2 hours. We know we can.
And if you're drag racing, your little few seconds pass does not even compare to running 9,000 for 2 hours. So it ain't gonna fall out and hurt nothing there. Plus, a lot of times people are running, you know, nitrous and all kinds of other things that actually cool the stuff down. So anyways, it's not that big a deal, but they make them wide so that it will suck the heat out of the valve and cool everything. It's not good for cylinder head flow. And you say, well, why not? Because the valve has to travel too far to get good airflow by there. So if we took that, and let's see, let me look at my camera. If we took that wide seat angle, and let's move over here for a moment. If we took that wide seat angle and we narrowed that to only this much, now the valve does not have to travel very far to start flowing air and fuel. It just cracks off the seat. It's pulling a lot of air and fuel immediately. But with a wider seat angle, it has to move further to do the same amount of work. So if I can start my flow numbers very early in the lift, well, that's just going to make more power for me. I also heard a guy say, and this was an older video, but he said that if you flowed your head and the head only flowed up to like 500 lift, then don't lift the valve more than 500 lift. Okay, said no race engine builder ever. Okay, why? Because of the time the valve is at max lift. Watch this now. Let's say the head flowed, and let's say it's an old junky iron head, right? It flows 210 CFM at 500 lift. You know how much I'm going to open that valve? 550 all day long. You say, well, why? Well, because it ain't hurting a darn thing for me to be at 550. And it means I'm going to be past 500 a lot longer. So I'm going to take advantage of the maximum flow I can get out of that head by exceeding that number. So if my head only flows up to 500, I'm going to lift it at least 550. And everybody I know, best in the world, they're going to tell you the same thing. Don't listen to anybody who tells you otherwise. And if you don't believe this and you're an engine builder, then don't write nothing stupid in my comments. You go home and try it. And you will find out that I am right. You know why? Because I've tried it. Just like, when was it I saw air-fuel ratio doesn't make that big a difference? What? Guys, 2 jet sizes changes horsepower numbers. 2. Just 2 sizes changes horsepower numbers. So either there's something wrong with your test, or the carburetor you were using is getting fuel from somewhere else, because they can do that, or you don't know what you're doing. You change the jets in that carburetor, you're going to see it on the dyno, or there's something wrong with your dyno. Period. Ask anybody who's really serious and does this for a living, such as me. You ask them, they will tell you, yes, it does. A big time does. Now, getting back to my point here. All right. We do have higher valve temps a little bit with the narrow seat angle, but we're racing. And these parts we buy, if you buy quality parts, they can withstand it, no problem. We also have coatings, beryllium copper seats. You're putting it in 7,000 press fit, nothing's going to happen. Not due to that. Especially if your air-fuel ratio is correct, that helps cool it. Now, one thing I will tell you about 2-barrel carburetors, guys, if any of you guys run 2-barrels, 2-barrel carburetors run hotter cylinder temperatures than a larger carburetor. Okay, they do. So every once in a while, you want to keep it from prolonged periods of idling, especially if you're on the dyno, making sure you're goosing it once in a while to get that fuel squirter to dump the fuel in, because it cools down the cylinder. If I'm doing a cam break-in on a 2-barrel engine, say it's a very high velocity engine with a 500 2-barrel, and one that we've had worked and it flows more than 500, but it's still a 2-barrel. If I'm doing a flat tappet cam break-in on it, I will goose those things every minute. What-ow, just to make sure I'm getting gas in there to cool down the cylinder temps, because they do run hotter than, say, a 4-barrel. Okay, so it's not really an issue, is it? So then why don't they take the time to cut the seats that way? Other than this reason, I really don't know. Now, okay, Salter, so you talked about that. Well, why don't you show us what it looks like? Glad you asked. Hang on. All right, so one more time. Let's look at this. This is stock out of the box. And let's see, let me get my, right there's the seat angle. It's very wide. I don't know if this phone even shows how wide that is, but it's very wide. Out of the box. Now here's one that we do. See the little line? That's about 40 thou wide. All right, now, does it matter? Yes, it absolutely matters. It absolutely matters. Back cuts matter. Valve seat angles matter. Stem size matters. Obviously, the smaller the valve stem, the more flow you're going to get. I spent years, guys, absolutely years perfecting my cutters. I have, I don't know, probably 10 that I developed. I have what's called an optical comparator. Basically, it's a big gigantic screen that blows the profile of this whatever object it is, and you can measure radiuses and angles with it, and I would use that to develop my valve seat profiles. And with Mark Smith from PME, Pro Motors out of Charlotte, he's passed on now, but back then I did some tests with him, and very well-known NASCAR engine builder, and I have some very good valve seats due to that experience. So you got to work at it. You got to work at it. Goodson has the ability to make those for you. So all you have to do is send them a little drawing on a paper, say, hey, make me a tool that I can cut the valve seat this angle, and they will make it for you. Or you can get with somebody who's already got it done, and they already have very high flowing, well known for their work, and just let them do your heads. Now there's a lot to this. That's why this is part 1. If I actually broke down every single detail, it's probably going to be about part 20 when I'm finished. Because we're going to talk about chamber work. We're going to talk about porting and blending. I'm going to show you about porting to the valve size. Okay? There is a law in physics that you cannot overcome. You have to port to the valve, not the racing. So if you get a set of heads from any particular type of racing genre, and that head had that valve in it, if you go messing with that port, you have ruined that head. Yes, you have. You can change the cam, you can change the intake, you can change a lot of things, but you port the head to the valve. Now, that's in the middle of this whole long process, because I chose the valve for this engine, I chose the valve for this bore, I chose the valve for my chamber. A lot of steps took place before I got to that part. But now that I'm at the valve, my runner, intake or exhaust, has to fit that valve. Keep that in mind.